Good evening, everybody. We're back for another episode on Lone Oak Farms, Farming Simulator 17, my favorite version of Farming Sim, I think, so far. And I think I like Lone Oak in this version just a tad better than in 19, although who cares, right? The point is it's Lone Oak family farm. And it looks like we left off in here. I'm just going around and moving out my equipment. That's kind of a habit I have. Looks like we left off on hauling bales, so we're going to continue kind of where we left off here and continue hauling them to market. I think I modded this particular trailer so that it'll hold 5 layers just to kind of cheat a little bit and help make things move a little quicker. But I think in real life you would never see more than 3 layers on a truck like this. I could be mistaken. Maybe somebody watching this knows their trucks. I just don't think I've seen them roaming the area here with more than 3 layers. And offhand, I don't even really know how heavy these bales are a piece. I know the game gives them a weight, but I equally don't know what those are in real life either. In real life, I've been inside this barn over here. Let me see if I can figure out how to sell these. Oofta. Sold them down. Let's go get rid of a few more. I'm just going to drive on through. I think in real life you would never do what I'm doing right here, driving clear on through. And I think, like I mentioned in a previous video, I'm not sure if I can't remember anymore what. Oh, oops. That wasn't very smart. I think in real life I wouldn't have done that either. You're supposed to wait till the cars go by, silly. And in real life, I think I'll just comment. I can't remember, like this lot over here to the left. I think that's something I added, of course. And I had to mess with the fence to do it. That would kind of make a video in its own right as to changes I made to the map. I think I eliminated fences kind of down in this area maybe, or I can't remember what all I did. So I could combine the fields. But in real life, I don't think I would have been able to drive through there with a big old semi-truck. But years ago, there was a man who lived there. I think he's long since passed away. Decades ago. I don't know that he particularly was a farmer. He just kind of had a home down in that dip, if you will, kind of where I think it's Beaver Creek is what it's called, comes through there and joins it up, with the spring coming off the Lone Oak Pond and kind of up in that area. But he may have grew up on a farm, and what's interesting about that particular fellow, I mean, just anomalies of a neighbor, if you will. I was told that apparently when he was a young buck, he lived a pretty wild and woolly life. Now, I don't know what all that means. Bear in mind, this would have been years ago, maybe the 20s, 30s? I don't know. I really couldn't tell, but a long time ago, basically 100 years ago, probably by now. So who knows what the standards of wild and woolly were back in those days, but apparently it concerned the family enough that they all but wrote the poor guy out of the will. I think they didn't trust him with the land or the assets or the farm or whatever they had going on. So they wrote something into the will, but as I understand it, he couldn't take possession or take charge of them until I think he was 50 years old. Now, I'm not 50 yet. My kids are trying to tease me and tell me I am, but I'm not. I can't imagine having to wait that long to finally be able to do, who knows how long his a family had passed away or left it to him. Maybe it was even 50, I think is what I was told. Now, let me see here. Let me get this turned back on. Work position is X. Okay. All right. I'll continue this very realistic mode of loading bales. I'm so thankful for the auto loaders. I know it kind of buggers realism and all that, but some of us, well, not only can we drive a truck straight in the field, we are no good at bale handling. I don't know that anybody would want to tolerate watching me attempt to load all these bales. So we'll just do it this way. So, and I guess maybe 50 isn't that old, uh, but I think back in the day, people didn't live as long, so I have a feeling family members had passed and he had to bow to the wishes of some trustee of the property until he was deemed old enough by the family that left him this before he could have custody of it. And as it turned out, even at 50 years old, I think what he ended up doing was selling the property, most of it, all except, and we'll see this kind of when we return down there, all except the little field that was right adjacent to the house and the barn, that we drive by, where we sell the bales. Whoops, looks like we're hitting an autosave. And so, I guess in reality, if the family's intent was that he would keep the family farm, he didn't end up doing that anyhow. But I guess at least he had some maturity behind him at age 50, to where to where he made a decision with eyes wide open. I don't know. Maybe you all have heard similar stories sometimes of arrangements made in the family. I'm aware of another family kind of in the not exactly a neighbor to Lone Oak, but I don't know, close enough to be. I mean, they're several miles up the road, if you will, where there was a family that had moved into the area years ago. They're one of these farms that has what's called a century farm designation. I don't know if other nations have something like this, or even if it's only a state designation. I don't know if it's a state of Oregon that has it, but I believe if a farm is in full operation for over 100 years, they record you in some register, and they give you this sign that you could put out front. And I mean, what does it do? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't make you any money. For all I know, it actually costs money to get the sign. Wouldn't surprise me if it did. But it's just kind of a nice little thing that says, hey, this farm has been in continuous operation for over 100 years. And it might need to be within the same family. That part I don't know. And anybody that lives in Europe or the UK, maybe they hear something like that and say, well, 100 years, that's chump change. It's the history of America, at least in terms of the Europeans that came over to settle the country, is so much shorter than it is in the UK, or Europe, where you have thousands of years of history there. So maybe you all would have a millennial farm or something, for all I know. If there's been a farm at a certain location for 1,000 years. But here, there just wasn't such a thing. I'd be surprised, in this area. Oh, I can't hardly see. I'd be I'd be curious if there's any farm that has lasted, say, 200 years. I bet those would be few and far between. Alright, oops, oh that's right, I gotta take it off. There we go. For example, I know the Lone Oak farm up there, it was started by my grandfather. Oh, let's see, he was born in 1926? Is that when it was? I can't even remember at the moment. And obviously he didn't start the farm, when he was born. So I think probably when he was a young man, 21, so that'd have been, say, 1946-ish, would have been about when he started the farm. My father, who's the oldest child in the family, he was born in 48. And, the year, as I record this year, it's 2022. So if the farm was started in, 46, well, you can do the math. Um, Basically that's another 24 years to go before it becomes a century farm to get to 2046. So I guess they'll get there. Now, to the north, my grandfather grew up kind of to the north of the farm, kitty corner, a little bit to the northwest, if you will. I think was a home place of his father's farm. And I think a few years ago, that farm also is continued in family hands, and it's now over 100 years. And I think I heard, a couple of my cousins farm it now, and I think I heard a number of years ago they already got the Century Farm designation. Haven't been by it in a while, but I'm pretty sure they have the Century Farm sign plunked out front. Like I say, probably doesn't do anything. It's more just an indication of, I don't know, survival, stick-to-itiveness, someone caring and working the land, all those many years. So I have confidence that Lone Oak is going to get there. I've mentioned a number of times my dear uncles who took over the farm from my grandfather, and it seems hard for me to imagine, but I mean, this is just how time goes, by so quickly. When I worked on the farm back in the day, my uncles were young men, and so was I. But now, a few decades down the road, and I mean, you all can tell some of the pictures I show, some are recent, but a number of them have some mileage on them from back in the 90s when I worked up there, and well, there's only one alternative to having more birthdays, and my uncles are aging too, and now I see some of my cousins, the children of my uncles, who are stepping into the business and helping on the farm, and starting to make decisions on things they would like to do. And I have no idea if they are yet literally part of the farm. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I'm not privy to those details. But so time goes, and I'm sure it's been that way from time, since the beginning of time, as property and businesses are passed from parent to child, and so forth. It's interesting. I think I've mentioned I'm an accountant by occupation, as is my father. My dad was probably one of the first kids to leave home. Well, maybe not. I think he had a sister that got married before him, but with a large family, it was, my grandfather was still farming, and he needed the farm for the livelihood, so the oldest couldn't just join the business, if you will. And I don't care if it's a farm or what it is. Probably it's true of any other business. Wow, boy, it feels like I am driving on ice. Maybe I'll just finish the thing up. Finish loading with this load here, and I'll get it all done. Be done with hauling the bales. Yep, looks like I have just one on top. We can do that, even if it should only have 3 layers, right? So actually, when I get through with this, I think I'm gonna send the tractor out to run a band of fertilizer, get that kind of ready. It's the middle of the summer, and this is where maybe there are a few limitations, in modding. Through the past episodes, everybody has seen how we harvested grass seed in here. But really, the grass seed mod is just piggybacking on the in-game grass kind of as it is. And so I think we all know in the game, during the year, what does it do? Grass regrows 3, maybe 4 times, to get through all the seasons. I can't remember. So what we're gonna see is, I'll fertilize it, and then as we head into the fall, the grass is gonna grow up, and it's gonna have the appearance that if you wanted to, we could harvest a second grass seed crop. And that would never happen in real life, of course. It just wouldn't. I mean, um, I suppose you might have a shot at it. Not really for seed, maybe you could, but you'd have to irrigate it heavily. I think I've mentioned it before. Our weather pattern in the summer is very dry. Uh, Basically, July and August we have virtually no rain. So there are guys that do a lot of irrigating in the Willamette Valley, where Lone Oak Farms is located. But it takes special permits, water rights to do that, and you got to have a reason. So up here in the hills, those farmers that raise grass seed, it's pretty rare that you see irrigation happening in the fields. Um, it seems like, as you would say, Mother Nature provides for the seed crop. It grows up, it flourishes in the spring, the fertilizer happens, there's just enough rain to set it up good for summer, for the seed heads to come on to mature, then it gets cut, it gets combined, and that's all that the grass seed plant is able to give. And then I think frankly, it kind of goes dormant over summer a little bit, once a crop is harvested. Unlike it was in game, where you'd see the yellow cut texture kind of under the windrows. In real life, you just don't see that. Most of the time, it's yellow underneath, and it stays that way clear until the fall, when the fall rains would happen. Or until it gets burned off, in which case it would turn black. I'm going to try to have an episode at some point to talk about burning. Even though they don't really do that much of it anymore, it's still of interest. I mean, I remain fascinated by it. I know some people in my family think I'm a pyromaniac, but there really is a science to fire and how it works and how they used it in the fields, and so won't do it in this one, but in another one we'll talk about it. And actually, in another version of, when it comes to that, another version of Farming Sim, the one before this one, I've kind of been experimenting a little with fire to see how hard it would be to get it to burn stuff. It burns stuff in game. It seems so many of the mods that I've worked on over the years are destruction or a problem for the farmer. The very first one I worked on was for rocks, where you would dig up rocks coming out of the field. Another one I made that I think is installed in here, it doesn't come up very often, is a hail damage mod, where if it hails, it's gonna take a piece out of your field, and if you got it growing, or if it's harvest ready, there's going to be sections of the field you can no longer harvest because it's going to become damaged. And I mean, there's another mod I was working on, I never finished, but it was called Storm Damage. Here a year ago, we had a really nasty ice storm in the middle of the winter, and it's the worst I've ever seen in my life. I'm hoping it's a once in a lifetime. There is still damage from it here a couple, 2, 3 years later. That still needs to be picked up and dealt with. But I mean, it just caused tons of damage. And when you got ice, tons and tons of ice over all the forests and trees and everything in the neighborhood, there's a sizable portion of your forests and trees that are simply going to be damaged. Especially the deciduous trees. The oaks had really a tough time. The maples. The fir trees, the pine trees, those seem to survive it a bit better for some reason, but not the deciduous trees. There's limbs coming down everywhere. So I have another mod, and it was working in game. It just required a lot more effort, I think, to fully polish it off as a mod, but would have loved to have it. But again, it's another destructive one. So I don't know how much people like destruction, a storm coming through, and first thing you have trees falling down everywhere, or bits and pieces of them getting cut off, and I don't know, maybe people's tolerance for that kind of thing would quickly run out. Plus, the limitations of the game engine might cause some issues with that too. You create all these physics objects that are now kind of roaming free around the map, if you will, and well, the game's got to deal with it. Now, which tractor did I use for? Maybe it was this one. Yeah, you get him going. Actually, let me look at the map real quick. I want to see how close am I to. Yeah, it's still green. I got a wheat harvest to do over here, and then we'll be done for the harvest season. But it just isn't quite ready. I have a feeling it'll be ready tomorrow because we're only on the second day of summer. But let me try to do a little fertilizing while I'm at it. And as I think on it, I mean, it's, ooh, that's maybe too close. What exactly is, I mean, we've kind of seen bits and pieces of the typical uh, procedure, if you will, of a grass seed farm. We've seen the harvest season. Oh, I'm going to need to load up some more in there. Oh, another autosave. Sorry. What do other YouTubers do? They just turn all that gripple off. Maybe they do. So appreciate having a trigger here to buy this stuff. I suppose that's an extra bit of realism I'm kind of foregoing. I really don't know how they handle their granular fertilizer up there. I'm pretty sure they have it delivered up there in bulk. I know it's pretty common, or this is FS17, but I think even here you'd buy bags of the stuff and you can lift it up and dump it in there. I don't recall seeing them use bags or it's still going, or that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure it's been handled in bulk and it's been in a big box, way bigger than the tractor, that I'm using here. And I think in a previous episode I showed, kind of what the homemade fertilizer spreader, if you will, that they use. All right, did I have? No, looks like I just deleted my courses, so I'm gonna back that up. Let me just set up another course. Fertilize and seeding. This is field 35. Oops, 35. Start here. One headland. I have another series running in Farm Sim 15, and I gotta say, it is so much nicer working with Courseplay in Farm Sim 17 than it is 15. Alright, let me get him moving. And we'll get another layer of fertilizer put on. Like I say, what we're going to see happen is this is going to grow. We have 3-day seasons, so it's probably going to grow up and look like we could harvest another crop. We're not going to do that. In real life, kind of like I described before, it would be completely yellow, what we would see right now. Maybe I should modify this so it does look yellow when it's cut. There are some varieties where it will appear green when the windrow's laid down, and those varieties, like some of the tall fescue, orchard grasses that way, their root systems are so deep into the soil that they're able to tap, I think, into water sources that, the ryegrass, the fine fescues, just don't have as developed of a root system, and they're not able to get. So they kind of yellow and go dormant. But some of the other grasses, I mean, even though you don't irrigate them, you wonder where they find the water. Maybe I'll just let them go for the moment. Oh, there's a good view of Mount Hood. I don't know if I can teleport over somewhere back over here. You know, I'm down to just a few minutes. Maybe what I can show, you know, eventually I also want to have an episode on this particular area right here because of all the areas of the map, this one is probably the least realistic. This is what had to be done, I think, to have kind of a storage system. In real life, there's a grass seed cleaner here, and like I say, I'll be having an episode on that. But while he's fertilizing away, why don't I show maybe a couple pictures that show kind of changes to lone oak over time. Um, and I think already, you know, we can see if I go, maybe this is what I need to do. We can see kind of the basic view of what lone oak looks like. You know, you got this shop building here. We have some buildings here. You got the old barn here. The farmhouse is over here. A couple other smaller buildings in here. So that's kind of how it is today, modern times. But let me switch now to, I'll just show a picture or two. And now this here, this is from, this would have been just before the main harvest season, and it's barely colored. It's horribly faded over time. But I think you can still see the basics of Lone Oak Farm. You know, Lone Oak, of course, would be up the hill this way. I believe this picture was taken maybe in the 60s. Now there's several buildings over here. There's the shop over here. But this building is still the same here. The farmhouse has been added on to. Um, there's now a building kind of in along here, but this is the old barn. You can see the tin work is kind of gray. You know, since it's been painted red. This little shack down here, which is also in the game, I mean, it's been there a long, long time. So it kind of is what it is. I think this was in the 60s, and you see the different equipment they had back in the day. I believe this is a John Deere 95H combine, a smaller combine than what they have today. Obviously, a hillside combine for their hills. You can see it's got a wheat header attached to it, and then to the wheat head, it also has attached the belt pickup. Now, this picture would have been taken by an airplane. The farm was in existence prior to this, of course, and there are a few older pictures. I want to go through those at some point too, where it shows what kind of combines they had even before this. And, you know, it was clear back to the days of pull type combines with tractors in the days before self propelled combines were, I won't say they didn't exist, but they were more of a novelty. And, you know, farms had to use the pull type machines, you know, to do their harvest. But the combine shed was here, you know, in later years, this has been expanded a little bit. Um, you see they got a garden here. This was called a boar shack. Well, I think there was hogs in here. There was, I know later, they had a pen out here. I don't exactly see the pen. Um, so I know they had some pigs in here. It looks like they don't have that little shed over here, so I don't think they had the meat packing room. That must have been added later. You can see kind of a little bit of corral. Family station wagon over here. Looks like maybe they've already abandoned it. In the days before screw augers, this was a type of belt conveyor for moving seed. Looks like they're storing it way over here. I bet they used it in the barn up here to put seed into it from time to time because this was the main hub of their seed farming. I think I explained before in the barn there were several bins in there that they had set up. Their grass seed cleaner was in the upstairs or in the haymow portion of the barn. And so all the seed went up into the barn and was handled in here. And actually, there was a significant period of time before the era this picture was taken where you might be surprised to learn this, but the grass seed was literally handled by hand and it was bagged off of the combine, and bags were dropped all over the fields, and then they would come up later and pick those up. They would take the bags in here, they'd have to pour all of them out individually to run them through the machines. Then they would bag them up again, and it was, just a lot of hand labor. So this is, like I say, a picture kind of from the 60s, and I don't know if there's any other item of interest in here. You can't really see the other equipment that they have. Um, this tree isn't there anymore. Oh, and we don't see evidently it was in later years that Grandpa got his windmill. You don't see that here. This tree looks pretty small here. In my childhood years, it grew to it's a maple, until they took it out a number of years later. I think these trees are the same. They almost look like weeping willows of some kind, just kind of droopy trees. Now, I mean, this building is red in game. The fuel depot was kind of on the other side. That's where they moved it. When I worked on the farm, it was up here. There was an enormous buried fuel tank in here. Gas and diesel was available, and even years and years ago, just like what you would encounter if you go into a service or filling station. That's kind of what they had there to dispense fuel. And in those days, you didn't have to lock it up or worry about it. Maybe zooming out here, you see out in the field, I don't know if I can zoom in, and I think I showed a picture of it. This would have been a John Deere 800 windrower, self-propelled cutter on the front. Um, it must have been taken, this picture must have been taken in the morning. I imagine they were cutting all night and they're just about done. You can see kind of the other windrows coming the other way. So they're just about ready to finish off this 30-acre field over here. So it's kind of interesting they capture that. So probably they're doing a lot of cutting. I can't tell. This here doesn't look windrowed yet, so that's probably coming next, when they would take the machines over there. They're probably getting the combine ready for harvest season. So just a lot of clues you can glean, I guess, looking at a picture like this. And as is with every farm, they all seem to have a boneyard somewhere. Now in this spot, there's another building. They kind of extended the building down a little further. It looks like there's an old car in here. I almost wonder if that was something we drug out then later. I know when I worked up there, this garden wasn't here. I believe the garden, well, looks like they have one up here too. I think the garden moved mainly from here up to here. Um, Lots of changes over time. And and you know what? Looking at the time here, I'm over my half hour. So to try to keep these episodes of reasonable size, I think I'll chop it off there, and we'll come back maybe in another episode to look at kind of changes over time. I have one other picture that's kind of top down that will give some historical perspective. Thank you for sticking with us and taking a look at today's episode. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye for now.